I just got to do Ariel's show. I love going on Ariel for a number of reasons. One, I love Ariel, but Ariel's an institution. You guys turn to Ariel. Like, the numbers that he gets are absolutely massive, and the diversification within our sport that he can discuss, boxing just by example. I'll see him cover basketball every now and then, pro wrestling. A lot of fun to go on there. But I'm just coming off of this, so these thoughts are fresh in my mind. I want to bring them to you guys because over the course of visiting with Helwani, we discussed Fury versus Ngannou. And Ariel loved it. He says it's got to happen. And he was talking about from a standpoint of finding out who the baddest dude in the world truly is. We've really got to find out, and we've got the opportunity, and therefore that fight must happen. Guys, do you agree? Do you agree? Because I pushed back on Ariel. I pushed back to his face. I'm not making this behind the point. I just want to bring it more to you guys. Is that what this is about? Because there was a time in my life where I did wonder that. I can remember the 80s. I remember a very clear conversation. I even had this in the kitchen with my own father. Is the Olympic champion of wrestling, amateur freestyle wrestling, the baddest dude in the world, or is the heavyweight champion of boxing the baddest dude in the world? I was from a wrestling family. My father's contention was it's the boxer. It's not us. It's not us, the wrestlers. You have to know how to box. At that time, it was Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson could beat up Bruce Baumgartner, who was the Olympic champion of wrestling. That was my father's contention. 1993 came along and the UFC started. It started to get tested in a more formal setting. But we definitely got our answer, didn't we? My father and I were both wrong. It was not the wrestling champion. It was not the boxing champion. Whoever the MMA champion. Where you don't limit rules. You don't limit realms. The free format fighting systems, and whoever stands on top of it is the baddest dude in the world, right? Like, this was established decades ago. I don't feel that that's ever been dented. I don't feel that that's ever been questioned. So if you take the grappling component out, you now have a stand-up fight. And there's a number of things you can call a stand-up fight. You could call it karate. You could call it taekwondo, which is still contested in the Olympics. Certain parts of the world, they'll call it Muay Thai. Certain parts of the world, we have kickboxing. Certain parts, we have Western boxing under the Queensberry rules. There's a number of ways to do stand-up, but if you make up a stand-up fight, we're not talking about who the baddest dude in the world is. Like, we can go out there and have some fun. We could go out there and put Francis and Fury and come up with whatever silliness we want to do, but we're not establishing, we're not promoting this and building this and trying to sell this to somebody as the winner of this is the baddest dude in the world, correct? And that goes either way. I'm not just patting it against our guy. I'm not just patting it because I feel very confident Fury's going to win and I don't want to make a dent into the sport that I love of MMA. It would go the other way as well. If Francis is to go out there and beat Fury, we don't get to crown Francis. Like, Francis is still going to have to come and test that with Jon Jones and Stipe Part 3 and Tai Tuivasa coming up. I mean, right, in all fairness, it's whoever the MMA champion is. And I was just surprised to hear that level of marketing because there is a lot of questions here that are going to get answered. I'm curious on them. I'm curious who's going to promote it, just by example. Because you're a certain kind of promoter if you go after weird stuff. Whoever promotes this is going to have a hard time showing his face in the circles of the fellow promoters. Truly. Anytime that you do something business-wise that is not sustainable, it's embarrassing. This is not sustainable. It's not as though we have Francis box Fury and we do really great, and then next week we have Kamaru box Triple G, by example, or Ryan Garcia gets in there with Henry Cejudo the following month. Like, this isn't sustainable. It's a one-time, it's silly and ridiculous. Now, if you think that I'm hating on that, I'll tell you right now as a promoter, I would do it. I would take it. But I would have to. I don't have a roster of 556 athletes. Like, there was even a time when Dana had to do silly things and did do them. How else do you explain the return of Hoist Gracie? How else do you explain the return of Tank Abbott? How else do you explain Tito versus Shamrock ever taking place? Right? Like, there's a time. But when you build a roster and you're organized and you don't have to do that anymore, it's one of these very interesting things. But if that fight does come to fruition, if we do see Francis versus Fury, we've got to be real honest at what we're doing. We're going out and having some fun. This is a cash grab. Nobody's hid that. There's no title up for stakes. They're not even doing it in boxing, so it won't even affect Fury's record, so which means there's no ego and there's no prestige on the line, right? You're over here doing something else. Fury could talk about, I haven't lost in 10 years. If he goes out and plays a game of checkers and gets beat, he still gets to say, I haven't lost in 10 years. Like, we don't hold everything against him. If you just want to talk about silly sports that you want to see Francis go do, I'd like to see him horseback ride. I believe that they call that equestrian. Like, there's something really funny about Francis in that outfit going over jumps that I would like to see if he was going to go do the luge. If you could take this great, big, massive, muscular man and stick him in this little tube and send him down the slopes, like, there'd be something there for me to see. I'll never come off of the idea that one of them has to put something on the line. And Francis, God bless him, has never said, I won't box Fury. In fact, Francis has said the opposite. He says, I would like to go and box Fury. It's Fury's side, for reasons that we'd have to speculate about, that have attempted to change the rules of boxing, which is an actual sport that we actually understand. Why are they trying to change the rules? They for sure are set on not boxing Francis. How come? Do they feel that that's so uncompetitive they couldn't sell? I'll accept that answer. Do they feel that that's so ridiculously uncompetitive that no commission would sanction it? I couldn't agree to that. A commission never should have sanctioned Floyd versus Conor McGregor. I fully understand that a commission's primary objective is commerce, but they take tax dollars and hang their hat on the argument of fighter safety. You cannot put a guy that's 49-0 against a guy that's 0-0. But they did. They did. Nobody questioned them, and we move forward. So I do come back to the original question. Only one side is trying to not make this boxing. Francis has said, I will box. I will come to your sport and I will box you. Francis has never argued about glove size. He's never argued about rules. He's never even argued about the round or the duration. Francis hasn't argued about anything. Fury's side continues to want to manipulate and play with the rules. And right now they've settled on something called a hybrid. I don't have the foggiest idea what a hybrid is. I truly don't. There's only one time in my life I've ever even heard the term hybrid, and it was written on the back of somebody's car that was like part electric and part gas. I don't know what it means. I don't know how I advertise to you, hey, make sure you tune in this way. Well, Chael, what do they do? Well, they're a hybrid. What? What am I saying? But if we're going to do the silliness, and there is something to be fun there, even if it's not sustainable, who's going to put their name on it? If it's for one night only and it's for fun and you think there's going to be a profit, there's going to be an answer to all of my questions. For sure. But I will push back at anybody that has the notion that we're going to attempt under some made-up set of rules that doesn't qualify as a sport under God's earth today. We're going to create a word that is somehow going to solve who the world's baddest man is. That's silly and that's untrue.